He wore a suit worth more than her annual rent, and she wore an apron stained with coffee. To Damon Cross, the billionaire hedge fund manager of the Titan Group, Lena was just background noise, a nameless waitress to be mocked for the amusement of his wealthy partners. But when he arrogantly asked her for financial advice as a joke, expecting a naive answer about savings accounts, he didn't expect her to glance at the confidential documents on his table and shatter his entire world. With 3 sentences, she didn't just silence the table. She exposed a multi-billion-dollar criminal conspiracy that would put a target on both their backs. This is the story of how the most powerful man in New York realized that the most dangerous person in the room wasn't the billionaire. It was the waitress. The air inside Le Veau d'Or, arguably Manhattan's most pretentious and exclusive steakhouse, smelled of truffle oil, aged mahogany, and old money. It was the kind of place where the silence was heavy, broken only by the clinking of crystal and the hushed whispers of deals that shifted the global economy. In the center booth, famously reserved for the city's elite, sat Damon Cross. At 34, Damon was the youngest managing partner in the history of the Titan Group. He was handsome in a predatory way, sharp jawline, eyes the color of cold steel, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. He was currently celebrating the pending acquisition of a massive pharmaceutical conglomerate, a deal that would net him a personal bonus of $50 million. Across from him sat Preston Galt and Arthur Vane. Preston was old money, sloppy and loud, the kind of man who inherited his fortune and thought it made him a genius. Arthur was the shark, silent, calculating, and currently nursing a scotch that cost $400 a glass. "I'm telling you, Damon," Preston slurred slightly, waving a fork loaded with filet mignon. "The market is for suckers. Retail investors, they're sheep. We shear them, we eat the mutton, and we wear the wool." Damon chuckled, swirling his wine. "Don't be so crude, Preston. We provide liquidity." "Liquidity?" Preston barked a laugh, attracting the attention of nearby tables. "That's rich. Speaking of liquidity, where is that waitress? My glass is dry." Lena Valenti stood near the service station, her back aching. It was her second double shift in 3 days. At 26, Lena looked tired. Her brown hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her uniform was clean but frayed at the cuffs. She had been invisible for 3 years. No one at Le Veau d'Or knew her past. To them, she was just Table 4's server. She adjusted her apron, took a deep breath, and walked toward the center booth with a bottle of the restaurant's finest Cabernet. "Finally," Preston sneered as she approached. "I was about to call the manager. I thought perhaps you'd gotten lost on the way to the cellar." "Apologies, sir," Lena said, her voice low and steady. She poured the wine with practiced precision, not spilling a drop. Damon watched her. He was bored. The conversation about market dominance had grown stale, and Preston was becoming insufferable. He wanted a distraction. He looked at Lena, really looked at her, and saw an opportunity for a cruel bit of theatre. "Wait a moment," Damon said, holding up a hand just as she turned to leave. Lena froze. She didn't turn around immediately. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "Don't engage. Just serve and leave." She turned slowly. "Yes, Mr. Cross? Is there something wrong with the wine?" "The wine is fine," Damon said, leaning back and crossing his legs. He gestured to the table, which was littered with leather-bound folders and a few loose spreadsheets stamped "Confidential." "My friend Preston here thinks regular people don't understand the complexities of high finance. I disagree. I think anyone can understand money." Preston rolled his eyes. "Oh, please, Damon, don't embarrass the girl." "I'm not." Damon smiled, a shark-like grin. "I'm asking for her opinion. Tell me, what's your name?" "Lena, sir." "Lena. Nice name. Let's say, purely hypothetically, I gave you $10 million right now. A tip. Where would you invest it? Crypto? Real estate? Would you buy a nice little house for your mother?" Preston snickered. Arthur Vane merely watched, his eyes narrowing. Lena gripped the empty wine bottle. She knew this game. She had seen men like this before, men who treated intellect as a VIP club that required a membership card she couldn't afford. She looked at Damon. He was expecting her to stutter. He was expecting her to say something quaint about paying off student loans. She looked down at the table, specifically at a document partially sliding out of Arthur Vane's folder. It was a balance sheet for a company called Oros Biotech. Most people would see numbers. Lena saw a narrative. She saw the debt-to-equity ratio. She saw the accelerated burn rate. And she saw the footnote about a Phase 3 clinical trial in Jakarta. "Well?" Damon pressed, his tone dripping with mock encouragement. "Don't be shy. Give us some financial advice. Make us rich." The restaurant seemed to go quiet. Lena lifted her chin. The fatigue in her eyes vanished, replaced by a razor-sharp coldness that caught Damon off guard. "I wouldn't invest in Oros Biotech, Mr. Cross," she said softly. The smile froze on Damon's face. Preston stopped chewing. Arthur Vane slowly set his glass down. "Excuse me?" Damon asked, his voice losing its playful lilt. Lena pointed a slender finger at the document on the table. "You're about to acquire Oros for $40 a share. You think their new cardiac drug is going to pass FDA approval because of the trial results in Jakarta. But if you look at line 42 of that spreadsheet, the R&D expenditure, it hasn't matched the necessary output for a valid trial size since last February." Damon stared at her. "What are you talking about?" "I'm saying," Lena continued, her voice gaining strength, "that the Jakarta trial data is fabricated to inflate the stock price before the acquisition. The capital expenditure doesn't account for the necessary cold chain logistics to store the samples. They didn't test 3,000 patients, Mr. Cross. Based on those shipping costs, they tested maybe 50. If you sign that deal tomorrow, the SEC will halt trading on Titan Group within a week for due diligence negligence. You won't make 50 million. You'll lose 4 billion in market cap by Friday morning." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Preston dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china, ringing like a bell. Arthur Vane snatched the folder, flipping it open to line 42. His face went pale. He pulled out a calculator, punched in a few numbers, and then looked at Damon with terrified eyes. Damon didn't look at Arthur. He couldn't take his eyes off the waitress. The amusement was gone, replaced by a mixture of shock and something darker. Fear. "Who are you?" Damon whispered. Lena's expression returned to the neutral mask of a server. "Just the help, sir. Would you like to see the dessert menu?" "No." Arthur Vane stood up abruptly, shoving the papers into his briefcase. "We're leaving. Now. Damon, we need to get to the office. If she's right—" "She is right," Damon said, his voice flat. He knew it instantly. The logic was sound. He had been so focused on the profit, he missed the logistics. A waitress had just saved him from the biggest mistake of his career. Lena placed the check on the table, face down. "I'll give you gentlemen a moment." She turned and walked away, disappearing into the kitchen. Damon sat there for a full 10 seconds, his heart racing. He grabbed the check. He didn't look at the total. He pulled out his black titanium Amex, threw it on the table, and then stood up. "Preston, settle the bill," Damon commanded, buttoning his jacket. "Where are you going?" Preston stammered. "To find out who the hell she really is." The kitchen of Le Veau d'Or was a chaotic symphony of shouting chefs and clattering pans, a stark contrast to the hushed luxury of the dining room. Lena moved through the steam like a phantom, dumping the empty wine bottle into the recycling bin. Her hands were shaking. "Stupid," she scolded herself. "Stupid, stupid, stupid. You should have kept your mouth shut." She had spent 3 years building this wall of anonymity. She lived in a studio apartment in Queens with a radiator that hissed and a lock that barely held. She paid cash for everything. She had no social media. Lena Valenti didn't exist on paper. "Lena!" The floor manager, a sweaty man named Grigori, barked at her. "Table 4 is asking for the check. Why are you back here?" "They're leaving, Grigori," she said, untying her apron. I don't feel well. I need to go home." "Home? It is 8 p.m. on a Friday. You leave now, you don't come back." "Keep my tips," Lena said, grabbing her coat from the locker. She didn't care about the job anymore. She knew men like Damon Cross. He wouldn't just take the advice and walk away. His ego wouldn't allow it. He would dig. And if he dug, he would find the soil was actually a grave. She exited through the back alley, the cold New York winter air hitting her face like a slap. She pulled her scarf tight and walked briskly toward the subway station. She needed to disappear. Again. Meanwhile, inside the restaurant, Damon Cross was ignoring his partners. He was standing at the host stand, looming over the terrified maitre d'. "I want her file," Damon demanded. "Sir, I can't just give out employee. I just tipped your staff $5,000 on a $300 meal," Damon interrupted, his voice low and dangerous. "I want to know her full name. Now." The maitre d' swallowed hard and tapped on the iPad. Lena Valenti. "Sir, she's been with us for 6 months. She's very quiet. We have a copy of her ID on file for tax purposes. Print it." 5 minutes later, Damon was in the back of his armored SUV, the city lights blurring past the tinted windows. He held a photocopy of a New York State driver's license. "Lena Valenti. Address 402B, Astoria BLVD. He pulled out his phone and dialed a number that wasn't saved in his contacts. It rang once. "Go," a voice answered. Rough, mechanical. This was heavy security. "I need a background check. Deep dive. Name is Lena Valenti. I'm sending you the ID now. I want to know where she went to school, who her parents are, and how a waitress knows how to audit a biotech balance sheet in 10 seconds. Time frame? Yesterday." Damon hung up. He looked out the window. He should have been on the phone with his legal team, cancelling the Oros deal. But he couldn't focus on the billions. He was obsessed with the anomaly. In the world of high finance, information was currency. And Lena Valenti was a loose bill on the sidewalk that turned out to be a winning lottery ticket. By the time Damon reached his penthouse overlooking Central Park, his phone buzzed. It was an email from his private investigator. Subject not found. Damon frowned. He walked into his living room, pouring himself a drink, and opened the attachment. "Mr. Cross, the ID is a high-quality forgery. The social security number attached to Lena Valenti belongs to a woman who died in 1998 in Ohio. The address in Astoria is a laundromat with mailboxes for rent. There are no school records, no credit history prior to 3 years ago, and no digital footprint. No Instagram, no Facebook, no LinkedIn. Whoever served you dinner tonight doesn't exist." Damon stared at the screen. A fake identity. This wasn't just a smart waitress. This was someone hiding. He thought back to her eyes. They weren't just intelligent, they were haunted. She had recognized the fraud in the Oros deal because she had seen it before. His phone buzzed again. A second email. Update. Ran facial recognition through the private databases, bypassing the standard public search. We got a hit. It's an 85% match, but the structure is identical. Damon clicked the second attachment. A photo downloaded. It was a younger version of Lena, wearing a graduation gown from Wharton Business School, smiling next to an older man in a tuxedo. The caption read, "Magna cum laude, class of 2018. But it wasn't the photo that made Damon's blood run cold. It was the name underneath it. Subject identified as Eleanor Vance. Father, Jonathan Vance, former CFO of Vanguard Corp. Damon dropped his glass. It shattered on the marble floor, amber liquid splashing his shoes. Jonathan Vance, the man who had been accused of the largest corporate embezzlement scheme in the last decade. The man who had supposedly stolen $200 million from the cartel-linked investors before hanging himself in his cell 3 years ago. His daughter, Eleanor, had vanished the day after the funeral. The police had looked for her. The feds had looked for her. And rumor had it, the cartel had looked for her. Everyone thought she was dead or living on a beach in Mexico with the stolen money. Instead, she was serving steak to the very wolves who had torn her father's company apart. Damon stood in the mess of broken glass. The Oros deal was a trap. He realized that now. But Lena, Eleanor, hadn't just saved him from a bad investment. She had inadvertently revealed that she was still alive to the one man who could sell her out. But Damon wasn't going to sell her out. He needed her. If she could spot a $4 billion lie in 10 seconds, she was the most valuable asset in New York. And if the people looking for her found out she was in the city, she was going to need protection. Damon grabbed his coat. He wasn't going to call his security team. This required a personal touch. He grabbed the keys to his Aston Martin, bypassing the chauffeur. He drove to Astoria. He knew the address on the ID was fake, but the restaurant manager had said she left 20 minutes ago. The subway from Midtown to Astoria took 30. If he hurried, he could catch her at the station before she vanished into the wind again. He parked illegally outside the N train station, scanning the crowd of tired commuters. Rain had started to fall, slicking the streets with neon reflections. And then he saw her. She wasn't wearing the waitress uniform anymore. She was in an oversized grey hoodie, looking over her shoulder, clutching a duffel bag. She wasn't going to her apartment. She was running. Damon stepped out of the car. "Lena!" he shouted over the traffic noise. She froze. She looked at him, her eyes widening in terror. She didn't wait. She bolted, sprinting down the sidewalk into the dark alleyway between 2 brick tenements. "Damn it!" Damon cursed. He took off after her. He was fit. He boxed 3 times a week, but she was fast, fueled by adrenaline and fear. She scrambled over a chain-link fence. Damon vaulted it, tearing the sleeve of his suit. "Lena, stop! I'm not going to hurt you!" he yelled, landing in a puddle. She cornered herself at the end of the alley. A dead end. A brick wall blocked her path. She spun around, reaching into her pocket. For a second, Damon thought she had a gun. Instead, she pulled out a small canister of pepper spray. "Stay back," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I swear to God, Cross, stay back." Damon held up his hands, breathing hard. Rain plastered his hair to his forehead. "I know who you are, Eleanor." The name hit her like a physical blow. The pepper spray lowered slightly. Her lip trembled. Don't say that name." "Jonathan Vance's daughter," Damon said, stepping closer, slowly. "Wharton graduate. Mathematical prodigy. The girl who vanished with the encryption keys to the Vanguard ledger." "I didn't take the money," she hissed, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "My father didn't take it either. They killed him." "I believe you," Damon said, and he realized, to his surprise, that he actually did. "You saved me tonight. You stopped me from walking into a trap with Oros Biotech. I owe you." You don't owe me anything, she spat. Just let me go. If you know who I am, then you know there are people who will peel my skin off to get what they think I have. I can protect you, Damon said. Like the feds protected my dad? She laughed, a bitter, broken sound. Go back to your penthouse, billionaire. You play with money. These people play with blood. I'm not talking about the feds, Damon said, his voice dropping an octave. I'm talking about resources. My resources. I have a safe house in the Hamptons, off the grid, private security that makes the Secret Service look like mall cops. Why? She asked, eyeing him suspiciously. Why would you help me? Because, Damon stepped into the light of a flickering street lamp. If Arthur Vane was pushing that Oros deal, it means he knew the data was fake, which means my partner is working with the people who framed your father. And if they take me down, they take the Titan Group down. He extended a hand. We have a common enemy, Eleanor. You have the knowledge. I have the power. We can keep running, or we can burn them to the ground. Lena looked at his hand, then at his face. She saw the arrogance, yes, but she also saw a fierce intelligence. She was tired of running. She was tired of being Lena the waitress. She slowly lowered the pepper spray. If you cross me, Damon, she whispered, I will ruin you. I know where the bodies are buried. Damon smiled, a genuine one this time. I'm counting on it. He opened the passenger door of the Aston Martin. Get in. We have a lot of work to do. As they drove away, neither of them noticed the black sedan parked down the street, its headlights off. Inside, a man with a scar running down his cheek pressed a button on his phone. We found her, the man said, and she's with Cross. Initiate the protocol. The drive to the Hamptons was conducted in a tense, heavy silence. The rain hammered against the roof of the Aston Martin, sealing them in a capsule of leather and low-humming engine noise. Damon drove with one hand on the wheel, his eyes constantly flicking to the rearview mirror. Eleanor sat in the passenger seat, shivering despite the car's heating. She held her duffel bag on her lap like a shield. They arrived at the safe house just after 2:00 a.m. It wasn't a house so much as a brutalist structure of concrete and reinforced glass perched on a cliff edge overlooking the Atlantic. Damon pulled up to the heavy steel gates. He didn't use a remote. He rolled down the window and pressed his thumb against a biometric scanner embedded in the stone pillar. A green light scanned his retina. The gates groaned open. Welcome to the fortress, Damon muttered, driving through. No Wi-Fi, no cellular signal, unless I route it through the encrypted satellite dish on the roof. It's a dead zone. They entered the house. The interior was cold, minimalist, and expensive. Damon immediately went to a wall panel, punching in a code. Steel shutters began to descend over the massive floor-to-ceiling windows, locking them down. You can relax, Damon said, tossing his keys on a granite island in the kitchen. The perimeter sensors are active. If a squirrel crosses the lawn, we'll know. Eleanor didn't relax. She stood in the middle of the room, looking out of place in her oversized hoodie. You think steel shutters will stop them? They have thermal imaging drones, Damon. They have hackers who can bypass military-grade firewalls. Then it's a good thing this system is hardwired. Analog backup. Damon poured 2 glasses of brandy. He slid one across the counter toward her. Drink. You look like you're about to pass out. Eleanor stared at the amber liquid. She took it, downing it in one burn. She coughed, the color returning to her cheeks. Okay. Damon leaned against the counter, crossing his arms. Now you talk. I know who you are, but I don't know the whole story. The news said your father embezzled $200 million from Vanguard's pension fund. Then he committed suicide. You disappeared. Fill in the blanks. Eleanor gripped the empty glass. My father was the most honest man in New York. That was his problem. She looked up at Damon, her eyes hard. Vanguard wasn't just managing pensions. They were the primary wash cycle for the Sinaloa cartel's North American operations. My father stumbled upon a shadow ledger. It looked like legitimate trades, high-frequency algorithmic trading, but the volume was fake. It was money laundering on an industrial scale. Arthur Vane worked at Vanguard before coming to Titan, Damon realized aloud, his eyes narrowing. Exactly, Eleanor nodded. Arthur was my father's protégé. Dad trusted him. He showed Arthur the ledger. 2 days later, the SEC raided our house. They planted evidence on Dad's computer. They froze our assets. And Arthur, he testified against him. Damon felt a knot of rage tighten in his stomach. Arthur Vane was his mentor, the man who had brought him into the Titan group. And the suicide? Damon asked softly. Murder, Eleanor said flatly. Dad was going to cut a deal. He had a copy of the real ledger on an encrypted drive. He was going to give it to the DOJ. They found him hanging in his cell the night before the meeting. The drive was missing from our evidence locker. So they think you have a copy, Damon surmised. I do have a copy, Eleanor whispered. Damon froze. Eleanor reached into her shirt and pulled out a simple silver necklace. Hanging from it was a small titanium pendant, shaped like a teardrop. She pressed a hidden groove on the side, and a tiny USB connector clicked out. This is it, she said. The Ledger of Silence. It contains the names of every politician, judge, and banker on the cartel's payroll. It traces every dirty dollar from Mexico to Manhattan, and it proves Arthur Vane isn't just a banker. He's the CFO of a criminal empire. Damon stared at the pendant. It was a nuclear bomb hanging around her neck. Why didn't you turn it in? To who? Eleanor laughed bitterly. The FBI agent assigned to my father's case bought a vacation home in Turks and Caicos the week after Dad died. There is no one to trust, Damon. The system is rigged. Not all of it, Damon said, his voice firm. He walked around the counter. I'm not rigged, and I'm currently the CEO of the company Arthur is using as his new playground. If he's washing money through Titan, I'm liable. I'm the fall guy. Yes, Eleanor said. That's why he brought you on. You're young, aggressive, and ambitious. You make money so fast, no one looks at the details. You're the perfect smokescreen. Damon felt a chill. His entire career, his success, his reputation, it had all been engineered. He wasn't the genius, he was the puppet. He looked at Eleanor. For 3 years she had been living in fear, working for tips, hiding this explosive secret. She was stronger than any boardroom shark he had ever met. Give me the drive, Damon said. Eleanor recoiled, clutching the necklace. No. I have a standalone server in the basement, Damon said quickly. Air-gapped, not connected to the internet. We can decrypt it. If we can cross-reference your father's data with Titan's current accounts, specifically the Oros biotech deal, we can build a case that even a corrupt FBI agent can't ignore. We can send it directly to the press, to the New York Times. Leak it all at once. Eleanor studied him. She looked for the lie. She looked for the greed. But all she saw was a man whose ego had been bruised and who wanted blood. If we decrypt this, she warned, and they find us, we're dead. There's no trial, just a bullet. They're already coming, Eleanor, Damon said. We might as well be armed. Slowly she unclasped the necklace. She placed the silver drive into Damon's hand. Her fingers brushed his. A spark of electricity, fueled by danger and adrenaline, passed between them. Don't make me regret this, Billionaire, she whispered. I won't, Damon promised. Follow me. The basement of the Hamptons' house was a humidor-turned-server room. The air was cool and dry, filled with the blue light of LED indicators. Damon sat at a terminal, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Eleanor stood behind him, watching the code cascade down the screen. "Your encryption is outdated," Damon muttered. "AES 256 is standard, but your father used a polymorphic key. It changes every time you try to access it." "Smart. He was a math genius," Eleanor said quietly. "Try the sequence 011235. Fibonacci." Damon typed it in. "Access denied." "Try his birthday," she suggested. "Access denied." "Think," Damon urged. "He made this for you to find, Eleanor. What is the key?" Eleanor closed her eyes. She thought back to the last time she saw her father, in the visitation room at the prison. He hadn't been allowed to speak freely. The guards were listening. He had just held her hand and said, "Ellie, remember where we used to look at the stars. The North Star never moves." "Polaris," Eleanor whispered. "Try Polaris." Damon typed Polaris. The screen flashed green. Decryption complete. Folders began to populate the screen. Thousands of them. Bank transfers, shell company registrations, email threads. Damon opened a folder labeled Project Chimera. His face went pale. "My God." He clicked on a spreadsheet. "Look at this. Titan Group acquired a logistics company in Texas last year. I signed off on that. I thought we were expanding our supply chain. But look at the shipping manifests." Eleanor leaned in, her hair brushing against his cheek. "They aren't shipping consumer goods. The weight discrepancies. These containers are listed as automotive parts, but the insurance value is 10 times the market rate. They're shipping cash," Damon realized. "They're smuggling bulk cash back into Mexico inside our trucks. Arthur is using my logistics network to move the cartel's physical money." He kept scrolling. "And here? The Oros biotech deal. It's not just about stock manipulation. Oros has a chemical import license. If we buy them, we inherit that license." "Precursor chemicals," Eleanor finished the thought, horror dawning on her. "For synthetic drug manufacturing. They want to turn Titan Group into a drug manufacturer." Damon slammed his fist on the desk. "He's turning my company into a cartel subsidiary, and once the deal is signed, he'll frame me for it. I'll go to prison, or I'll end up like your father, and Arthur will walk away with the keys to the kingdom." "We have the proof," Eleanor said, pointing to the screen. "This links Arthur directly to the accounts. We need to upload this. Now." "I can't upload it from here," Damon said. "I told you, we're air-gapped. To send this to the press, I have to connect the server to the satellite uplink on the roof. But the moment I do that, we light up on the grid. If anyone is monitoring Titan's network signature, they'll see a massive data packet outgoing. Do we have a choice? No." Damon initiated the uplink. Connection. Establishing. 20%. Suddenly, the lights in the basement flickered. The blue LEDs turned angry red. A klaxon blared through the house, a low, rhythmic, thrumming sound. "What is that?" Eleanor backed away from the screen. Damon looked at a separate monitor, displaying the external security cameras. "Perimeter breach." On the screen, grainy black and white footage showed 3 black SUVs smashing through the steel gates. They didn't wait for the code. They rammed them with bull bars. Men poured out of the vehicles. They weren't wearing police uniforms. They were wearing tactical gear, balaclavas and night vision goggles. They moved with military precision. "Mercenaries," Damon said, his voice deadly calm. Arthur didn't wait for morning. "They found us," Eleanor panicked. "How did they find us?" "My car," Damon cursed. "The Aston Martin has a GPS tracker for insurance. I disabled the dashboard one, but there must be a backup redundant system I missed. I led them right to us." "Upload at 45%. We have to hold them off until the upload finishes, Damon said. He opened a drawer under the server desk and pulled out a Heckler & Koch P30L handgun. He racked the slide. Eleanor stared at him. You have a gun? I manage billions of dollars in a city full of sharks, Eleanor. I take precautions. He handed her a heavy flashlight. I don't have a second gun. Stay behind me. We need to get to the upper level. The satellite dish controls are in the master bedroom. If they cut the power, the upload stops. I need to override the breaker manually. They ran up the stairs, the sound of shattering glass echoing from the living room above. The steel shutters were holding, but the front door was being battered by a battering ram. Boom! Boom! Crack! The heavy oak door splintered. Upstairs, go! Damon pushed Eleanor toward the landing. As they reached the top of the stairs, the front door gave way. 4 men swarmed into the foyer, rifles raised. Damon didn't hesitate. He leaned over the banister and fired 2 shots. The lead mercenary took a round to the shoulder, spinning around. The others scrambled for cover behind the granite kitchen island. "Suppressive fire!" one of the mercenaries shouted. Bullets chewed into the drywall around Damon and Eleanor. Plaster exploded in white puffs. They dove into the master bedroom, Damon kicking the door shut and locking it. "That door won't hold them for long," Eleanor gasped, crawling across the floor to avoid the bullets punching through the wood. "It doesn't have to," Damon said. He ran to a panel by the bed. "Upload is at 78%. Come on! Come on!" Outside the window, a roar grew louder. Not a car, a helicopter. "They brought air support?" Eleanor asked, terrified. "No." Damon looked out the window. A sleek, black helicopter was hovering over the cliffs, its searchlight blinding them. "That's not theirs. That's mine." Eleanor looked at him. "Yours?" "I called for an extraction the moment we walked in the door. Just in case." Damon grabbed her hand. "The upload is at 90%. We can't stay here. The server will finish the job automatically, as long as the power holds." The bedroom door handle was shot off. A boot kicked the door open. Damon fired blindly through the doorway, forcing the mercenaries back. "To the balcony!" He dragged Eleanor to the balcony doors, shattering the glass with a heavy chair because the shutters were still down. They stepped out into the raging storm. The wind whipped Eleanor's hair across her face. The helicopter hovered 10 feet above the balcony, the pilot struggling against the gale. A rope ladder dropped down. "Go!" Damon shouted. "Climb! I can't leave you! I'm right behind you! Go!" Eleanor grabbed the ladder. It was slick with rain. She pulled herself up, swinging wildly over the jagged rocks and the churning ocean hundreds of feet below. A mercenary burst onto the balcony. He raised his rifle, aiming at Eleanor. Damon turned, exposing himself. He fired 3 times. The mercenary dropped, but another one appeared, firing a burst. Damon jerked violently, clutching his side. "Damon!" Eleanor screamed from the ladder. Damon gritted his teeth, stumbling. He grabbed the ladder with one hand, his blood staining the white rungs. "Pull up! Pull up!" he screamed into his headset. The helicopter engine roared, banking sharply away from the house just as the mercenaries opened fire on the aircraft. As they ascended into the stormy sky, Eleanor looked down. The safe house was swarming with armed men, and on the horizon, the first light of dawn was breaking. Damon collapsed onto the floor of the helicopter cabin, his hand pressed against his abdomen. Blood was seeping through his fingers. "Damon!" Eleanor unbuckled and crawled to him. He looked at her, his face pale, sweat mixing with the rain. He forced a weak smile. Check the phone," he wheezed, pointing to his pocket. Eleanor pulled out his phone. The screen was cracked, but the notification was clear. "Upload complete. Files sent to NY Times, Wall Street Journal, FBI Cyber Division." "We did it," she sobbed, pressing her hands over his wound to staunch the bleeding. "We did it, Damon." "Not yet," Damon whispered, his eyes fluttering shut. "Now, The war starts. The helicopter banked toward the city, carrying a dying billionaire and a waitress who had just lit a match that would burn down the financial world. The world was white. White lights, white walls, white noise. Damon Cross lay on a surgical table in the center of the Sanctum, a private, off-the-books medical facility in Upper Manhattan, reserved for clients who couldn't afford for their gunshot wounds to appear on police reports. Eleanor stood on the other side of the observation glass, her hoodie stained with Damon's blood. She watched as a team of 3 surgeons worked to remove the bullet lodged near his liver. "He has lost a lot of blood," a nurse said, stepping out of the room to check on her. "You should sit down, miss. You're in shock." "I'm fine," Eleanor said, her voice hollow. She wasn't fine. She was vibrating with adrenaline. She looked up at the wall-mounted television in the waiting area. The volume was muted, but the chyron screaming across the bottom of the screen was loud enough. Breaking news. The Vance papers. Massive data leak exposes. Criminal underworld linked to Titan Group. FBI raids. Oros Biotech. Manhunt for Damon Cross. Billionaire CEO missing. Eleanor grabbed the remote and turned up the volume. "Chaos on Wall Street this morning," the news anchor announced, looking flustered. "Documents released anonymously to major news outlets appear to exonerate the late Jonathan Vance, accusing instead high-ranking executives at the Titan Group of orchestrating a multi-billion-dollar money laundering scheme. While the FBI has not confirmed the authenticity of the documents, Titan Group stock has plummeted 40% in pre-market trading." The screen cut to a live feed outside Titan Tower. A press podium had been set up. Standing there, looking grave and concerned, was Arthur Vane. Eleanor's breath hitched. He's controlling the narrative. "We are shocked and appalled by these fabricated allegations," Arthur spoke into the microphones, his voice steady. "It is with a heavy heart that I must inform the public that our CEO, Damon Cross, has been suffering from a severe mental health crisis. We believe he has been manipulated by a disgruntled former employee of Vanguard. We are cooperating with authorities to find Mr. Cross and get him the help he needs." "You liar!" Eleanor hissed at the screen. Arthur continued. "The violence at Mr. Cross's Hamptons estate last night was a tragic result of his instability. We urge him to surrender." He was framing Damon. He was spinning the mercenary attack as a psychotic break by Damon himself. If the police found them now, they wouldn't listen. They would shoot. The doors to the operating room opened. The lead surgeon stepped out, pulling off his mask. "He made it," the surgeon said. "We got the bullet. He's stable, but he's weak. He needs rest for at least a week." "He doesn't have a week," Eleanor said, turning away from the TV. "He barely has an hour." She walked into the recovery room. Damon was groggy, an IV drip connected to his arm. He blinked his eyes open as she approached. Did it work?" he rasped. "The upload worked," Eleanor said, pulling a chair close to the bed. "But Arthur is ahead of it. He's claiming the documents are fake and that you're insane. He's buying time to scrub the accounts." Damon tried to sit up but groaned, falling back against the pillows. "He can't scrub the blockchain. The ledger captures everything." "He can move the liquid assets," Eleanor argued. "The ledger proves past crimes, Damon. But right now, he has control of the authorization codes. He can empty the Titan liquidity pool. That's $4 billion. He's going to take the money and run to a non-extradition country before the FBI finishes analyzing the data." Damon closed his eyes. "I need my phone." "Damon, you can't—" "Give me my phone, Eleanor." She handed it to him. He dialed a number. "Security Command," a voice answered. "This is Cross. Authorization Alpha 9 Zulu." "Mr. Cross?" "Sir, we have orders to detain." "Listen to me." Damon's voice found a sudden, terrifying strength. "Arthur Vane is a traitor to this company. Check your email. I just forwarded you the raw data from the Vance ledger. Look at the payroll. Arthur has been paying himself bonuses from the pension fund. Is that who you want to take orders from?" There was a long silence on the other end. Then the guard spoke. His tone shifted. "What do you need, sir?" "I need eyes on Arthur." "Where is he?" "He's in the penthouse office, sir. He's locked down." He dismissed the regular security detail and brought in his own private contractors. "They're shredding documents." "I'm coming in," Damon said. "Sir, the building is surrounded by NYPD and press." "I know. Get the helipad ready. We're coming in from the top." Damon hung up and looked at Eleanor. He ripped the IV out of his arm. Blood trickled down his wrist, but he ignored it. "You're insane," Eleanor said. "You can't walk. You've been shot." "I can walk." Damon gritted his teeth, swinging his legs over the side of the bed. His face went grey with pain, but he stood up. He swayed, and Eleanor caught him. "We have to stop him, Eleanor. If he leaves with that money, he wins. He'll disappear, and we'll spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders." Eleanor looked at the man she had served wine to just 24 hours ago. The arrogance was gone. In its place was a raw, desperate courage. "Okay," she said, "but you're not going alone. And we're not going just to fight him. We're going to break him." "How?" Eleanor smiled, a cold, dangerous smile that reminded Damon of the moment she first deconstructed the Oros deal. "I know the one thing Arthur Vane cares about more than money," she said, "his legacy. And I know how to destroy it." The helicopter ride from the medical facility to the roof of Titan Tower was short and turbulent. Below them, Manhattan was waking up to the scandal of the century. News trucks ringed the skyscraper like vultures. Damon leaned heavily on Eleanor as they stepped onto the windy helipad. He had wrapped his midsection tightly in bandages and put on a fresh shirt provided by the clinic, though it sat awkwardly over the bulk of the dressing. 2 loyal security guards met them at the roof access door. "Mr. Cross," the head guard nodded. "The elevator is locked out. Vane has overridden the system from his terminal. He's on the 90th floor." "Cut the power to the elevators," Damon ordered. "We'll take the service stairs down 1 flight. He won't expect us to walk." "He has 3 armed men inside the suite," the guard warned. "I don't care," Damon said. "Open the door." They descended the concrete stairwell. Damon's breathing was ragged. Every step was agony, but he kept moving. Eleanor held his arm, her eyes scanning for threats. They reached the service entrance to the CEO suite. Damon paused, wiping sweat from his forehead. "Ready?" he asked. "No," Eleanor admitted. "Let's do it." Damon swiped his master key card. The light turned red. "Access denied." "He deleted my credentials," Damon cursed. "Move," Eleanor said. She pulled a small device from her pocket, a signal spoofer she had taken from the server room in the Hamptons. She held it against the reader. It cycled through codes rapidly. Beep, green, waitress skills? Damon raised an eyebrow. "YouTube tutorials," she replied. She pushed the door open. They stepped into the expansive reception area of the executive suite. It was in chaos. File cabinets were overturned. Shredded paper covered the floor like snow. Standing by the window, stuffing hard drives into a briefcase, was Arthur Vane. 3 men in tactical gear stood guard with submachine guns. "Arthur!" Damon's voice boomed across the room. Arthur spun around, his eyes widened. "Damon! You're supposed to be dead!" "Sorry to disappoint." Damon limped forward, pushing Eleanor slightly behind him. "You really should have checked the body count at the safe house." The mercenaries raised their weapons. "Don't!" Arthur shouted. "Not here. Too much noise. The feds are in the lobby." Arthur looked at Damon, then at Eleanor. A sneer curled his lip. And the waitress, the ghost. You two make a pathetic couple. It's over, Arthur, Damon said, leaning against a mahogany desk for support. The Vance papers are public. The accounts are frozen. Not all of them, Arthur laughed, tapping his laptop. The Cayman routing numbers are distinct. I have a transfer pending for $4 billion. By the time the FBI cuts through the blast doors downstairs, I'll be on the roof, and the money will be in an account that doesn't officially exist. I win. You don't win, Eleanor stepped out from behind Damon. Because you forgot one thing, Arthur. And what is that, my dear? Did you forget to refill my water? I forgot nothing, Eleanor said, her voice steady and projecting across the room. I remember everything, including the fact that you have a severe allergy to losing control. She held up her phone. I didn't just upload the ledger to the press, Arthur. I uploaded it to the Sinaloa cartel's private communication network. Arthur's face went white. The arrogance vanished instantly. You did what? You were stealing from them too, Arthur, Eleanor said, bluffing with the confidence of a poker pro. Line 405 of the ledger. Consulting fees. You were skimming 5% off the top of their wash cycle for yourself. I highlighted that section for them. You're lying, Arthur whispered. Am I? Eleanor tapped her phone screen. Because I'm pretty sure the text I just got is from a very angry man in Mexico City who wants to know why his accountant is stealing from him. The mercenaries in the room looked at each other. They were hired guns, likely paid by the cartel's intermediaries. If Arthur was stealing from the cartel, their loyalty just expired. One of the guards lowered his weapon. Mr. Vane, is this true? She's lying, Arthur screamed, spit flying from his mouth. Kill them! Kill them both! The guard turned his gun toward Arthur. We don't work for thieves, Vane. The boss doesn't like skimmers. Arthur looked at the gun, pointed at him. He looked at the laptop where the transfer bar was hovering at 99%. I can pay you, Arthur stammered. Double whatever they pay you. It's too late, Damon said. Look at your screen, Arthur. Arthur looked down. The transfer bar had stopped. Transaction cancelled. Insufficient authorization. How? Arthur whispered. I have the codes. You have your codes, Eleanor said. But the Titan Group bylaws require 2 signatures for any transfer over $1 billion. The CEO and the CFO. She pointed to Damon. Damon revoked his digital signature 3 minutes ago via the security desk. You can't move the money alone. Arthur stared at the screen. The realization hit him. He was trapped. The money was stuck. The police were downstairs. The cartel knew he was a thief. He let out a guttural roar and lunged for the drawer of his desk. Gun! Damon shouted. Damon threw himself at Arthur, ignoring his wound. He tackled the older man, crashing into the heavy oak desk. The impact sent a jolt of agony through Damon's body, tearing his stitches. Arthur was desperate. He clawed at Damon's face, kicking at his stomach. He managed to pull a silver revolver from the drawer. He raised it, aiming at Damon's head. Bang! Glass shattered behind them. Arthur froze. He looked down at his shoulder. A red blossom of blood was spreading on his suit jacket. He dropped the gun, screaming in pain. Damon rolled off him, gasping for air. Standing in the doorway was not the police. It was the head of Titan Security, his sidearm raised, smoke drifting from the barrel. Step away from Mr. Cross, the guard said calmly. Arthur fell to his knees, clutching his shoulder. He looked up at Eleanor, his eyes full of hate. You, he spat, you're just a waitress. Eleanor walked over to him. She picked up the revolver from the floor and placed it on the desk, out of reach. She looked down at him with pity, not hate. I'm an analyst, Arthur, she said softly. And you just made a bad trade. Damon struggled to his feet, holding his side. Blood was seeping through his shirt again. He stumbled, and Eleanor was there instantly, wrapping her arm around his waist. "We need to get you back to the hospital," she said, her voice trembling now that the danger was over. "Wait," Damon said. He looked at Arthur, who was whimpering on the floor as the security team moved in to zip-tie his hands. "You're fired," Damon said. Sirens wailed from the hallway. The elevator doors, finally overridden by the authorities, dinged open. A SWAT team poured into the room, shouting commands. Damon held up his hands, leaning heavily on Eleanor. "Don't shoot," Eleanor shouted. "We're the victims, and that's the man you want." She pointed at Arthur. As the police swarmed Arthur Vane, Damon looked at Eleanor. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold darkness at the edges of his vision. We actually did it," he whispered. "Yeah," Eleanor said, tears stinging her eyes. "We did." Damon's legs gave out. He collapsed into her arms, unconscious, as the flash of press cameras from the helicopter outside illuminated the room like lightning. 3 months later, the snow in Central Park had melted, replaced by the pale green of spring. The doors of the Southern District Courthouse opened, but it wasn't Damon Cross who walked out in cuffs. It was Arthur Vane. He had pleaded guilty to racketeering and conspiracy to commit murder, choosing a life in solitary confinement over a trial that would expose him to the cartel's wrath. Damon waited at the bottom of the steps, leaning on a sleek carbon fiber cane, the only evidence of the bullet that nearly ended him. Beside him stood Eleanor. Gone was the stained apron and the oversized hoodie. In a tailored navy blazer, she looked like a force of nature. "Mr. Cross," a reporter shouted, "is Titan Group liquidating?" Damon stepped to the microphone, silencing the crowd. "Titan is not liquidating. We are restructuring. We have cooperated with the DOJ to return every stolen dollar to the Vanguard Pension Fund." He paused, glancing at Eleanor. "But the firm requires a new kind of oversight. Someone who can spot a lie in a spreadsheet from a mile away. I am stepping down as sole strategist to appoint Eleanor Vance as the head of our new forensic accounting division." Eleanor stepped forward, unflinching as the cameras flashed. "My father was murdered for trying to do the right thing. Today, we finished his work. If you are hiding money, cooking books, or funding terror, we will find you." She looked directly into the lens. "And we won't just ask for the check." That evening, the city quieted down. Damon and Eleanor stood outside Le Veau d'Or. The maître d', the same man who had nervously printed Eleanor's fake ID, nearly fainted when he saw them. "Mr. Cross, Miss Vance, we didn't know you were coming. We are fully booked." "We don't need a reservation," Damon said, opening the door for Eleanor. "I bought the building this morning. Tell the staff everyone gets a 20% raise. Except the floor manager. Fire him." They sat at table 4, the center booth, the seat of power. But the dynamic had shifted. There were no confidential files, just 2 people forged together by fire. A young waitress approached, her hands shaking as she recognized them. "Good evening. Can I get you started?" Damon looked at her. He saw the frayed cuffs of her uniform and the exhaustion in her eyes. He saw Eleanor. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah, sir." "Take your time, Sarah," Damon said gently, his voice warm. "We aren't in a rush." As the girl hurried away, Eleanor reached across the table, tracing the scar on Damon's wrist. "You know, Titan stock is down 60%. You aren't the richest man in New York anymore." "I know," Damon said. He looked at her with a clarity he had never possessed when his portfolio was full. "I didn't lose anything, Eleanor. I was bankrupt before I met you. I just had a lot of money." He raised his water glass. "To bad investments?" Eleanor laughed, a sound free of the past. She clinked her glass against his. No, to the best tip you ever gave. Outside, the city lights shimmered. They had the ledger. They had each other. And for the first time, the balance was 0. And that is how a single question in a steakhouse brought down a criminal empire. It's a reminder that intelligence doesn't wear a price tag, and sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one serving the coffee. Damon Cross learned that you should never judge a book by its cover, especially when that book is a ledger that can send you to prison. What do you think? Would you have had the courage to speak up like Eleanor, or would you have stayed silent? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of justice and romance, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for listening.